Okay, I'm going to show you how to cut your plastic bags down into strips to use on the loom. So you want to take your plastic bags and lay them as flat as you can. So pull the corners out and lay them flat, and then you can stack 3 to 5 at a time if you feel comfortable doing that to cut them. So try to lay them as close together as you can. You're going to fold it in half and then fold it in half again. And you want to make sure that you get all of these seams off. So go in about 1.5 to 2 inches from the bottom and make a cut to cut all of that extra off. And then the same thing. So you'll go down the lowest point where your handles start on the bag, about another 1.5 to 2 inches, so that we make sure we get all of that weak area off of the bag. Cut that off. This unfortunately just gets recycled or thrown away. And then what you have left here, you're going to cut into just 2 sections. So we like to have the strips about 5 inches wide. Those seem to be a good width for weaving. The narrower strips we can still use, but you just have to weave tighter and you have to use more of them. So we found it's best if we can do strips that are about 5 inches long. If you have, if you're used to using a rotary cutter and you prefer to do that, you can usually stack several more bags at a time and do those at once with a rotary cutter. There again, you're just gonna 1.5 to 2 inches from the top and cut off, and the same from the bottom. And then you're just gonna cut them in half. So that's a way to get more done quickly if you're used to using a rotary cutter. If you have large bags, they can still be used. I usually set those aside and do those in groups if you have more than one, or just one at a time. And there again, you're going to do it the same way. So cut off your top and your bottom. And then you want your strips to be about 5 inches. So just kind of eyeball however many you can get out of that strip, out of that bag to make strips. Okay, so now when you have your strips, you need to make them into Plarn. So you take 2 strips, and it's just going to be a slip knot. Add them together. And to load the loom, you're going to need a large ball, so several strips put together to make one long strip. When you're weaving, I like to use just 2 at a time. So when you load your loom, you're going to start with the end and just start with that loop. Make sure that your rods are pointing up, and you're just going to loop it right over that to start. And then you're going to go around this first rod, the eyelets on the steel rod, 3 times. Then when you're coming back up after your 3rd one, you're just going to go to the first peg and then just back and forth on the pegs, keeping this snug. You don't want to stretch the Plarn, but you want to keep it snug and not loose. And you continue going back and forth until you have the entire loom loaded, and then I'll show you how to finish it off. Okay, so I flipped my loom around, but we're just about done weaving, so we just went on the last peg down there, and here's our last peg here. And then just like we did at the beginning, we're going to go around the eyelets on the end 3 times. And then to tie this off, you're going to bring it down and find where there's a knot here. Make sure you go past that. So you're going to loosen this up So we remove the rest of the ball of Plarn, and then you're going to go back down here where this knot is, and we're just going to tie it off there. And then we can just trim the excess off here. Okay, now we're ready to start weaving. You want to take some strips. And to start, you just grab all of this that's on this first rod and slide underneath the whole rod and everything and add it by using a slip knot. And then you're just going to start weaving. So over, under, and both of the strands that are on each peg are going to be considered one. So under, over these two, under these, over these, under. So just continue adding strips as you go as needed with a slip knot. You always want to make sure that these two are even. You don't want them to end up looking like this where they're off, because that creates loops then in your final product that you don't want. So just always holding this one tight so that you get it even. And continue weaving over, under, or under. It works best if you hold the end of your strand and use your fingers kind of as the needle to go. So then when you get to the end, I'm going over this last peg, and so you need to go under all of these that are on this last rod. So underneath the rod and everything, because the rod is what keeps us even on the ends. And so then you go back over the rod when you start. This one wasn't over, so I'm going to go under. It should be exactly opposite of what you did the first time through. And continue just going back and forth, adding more strips as you need to, and then keeping it nice and tight up here at the top as you work your way. Okay, so again, I flipped my loom. So this is the opposite side that we started prior to this video. It's nice if you can load your loom and start it and work from both ends in, because it allows for more people to work at the same time. But since we went back and forth on those pegs, it's going to be a little bit different on the other end. So when you start, you want to come down here to the first side that you loaded, and you're going to grab all of these that were that first weave. So one of these is going to actually go in the next group. So when you start, you only want to start it on the same strips so it evens up at the other end. And start it with a slip knot again. And then when you start weaving, you need to be careful that you're using the same two strips that you used down there. So there's going to be one from each peg. So this is going to be my next one, and this will be my next one. That way, when you get to the middle, you've used the same strands to weave, and it'll be much more cohesive. So what I do is I usually weave that first row or two on the opposite side, and then I actually go through and I make sure that all of these match up with the same two down here. So that way I end up in the middle using the same strands. Okay, so when you're done weaving from both sides, you want to get this so it's pretty tight from both sides, and just weave to a middle point here from each end with your bags, your strips, and then you're just going to find a good spot and give it a good tight square knot. Scissors. And then you can just trim the excess off nice and tight next up to the knot. Like that. Try to fill it in. Then you're done. So then what you need to do is you need to remove these outer rods. So, and they might be pretty tight because you've got a lot of strips woven to them. You're gonna take those out from both sides. And then I'll show you how to chain off the end. Okay, so when you're done weaving from both sides, you want to get this so it's pretty tight from both sides, and just weave to a middle point here from each end with your bags, your strips, and then you're just going to find a good spot and give it a good tight square knot. Scissors. And then you can just trim the excess off nice and tight next up to the knot. Like that. Try to fill it in. Then you're done. So then what you need to do is you need to remove these outer rods. So, and they might be pretty tight because you've got a lot of strips woven to them. You're going to take those out from both sides, and then I'll show you how to chain off the end. Okay, so now we're ready to take it off of the frame. So you're going to pull all of these off, and this first eyelet is usually pretty tight. You want to keep all of those together, and then you're going to take the ones off of the first peg. The ones off the first peg are going to go through the ones from the eyelet, and then you're going to grab the ones from the first peg. Grab your second peg. Those are going to go through the ones from the first peg, and you grab those, and then you're going to chain this off. Some people call it a daisy chain or a chain stitch if you're a crocheter, but you're just really taking the new loops through the old loops and grabbing the new ones, and then just keep going across. And it's going to look a little loose at first, but once we get it off, completely off the frame, it'll all even out and look nice. So you just continue all the way down until you get to the end of your loom. So those ones that are on the eyelet tend to be a little snug. Just work them a little ways. And then you're just going to tie this into a nice knot. Hopefully you can get enough. This is going to be pretty tight, but hopefully you can get that so you have 2 knots there, and then you can trim off the excess. Otherwise, just make sure it's good and snug and it's not going to unravel on you. And then you're going to do the same for the other end, and then you're all finished.